Has Cleopatra's tomb been found? The shocking discovery. Let's uncover the secrets of the past. Join us on this journey. Egyptian archaeologists recently made an incredible discovery near Cairo. Drumroll, please. They found the oldest and most complete mummy ever uncovered in the country. That's right. It had been kept under wraps all this time. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs near the Step Pyramid of Djoser, which dates back to ancient Egypt's Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also discovered several other tombs, including one belonging to a high-ranking official and another to a secret guardian who had the authority to perform special ceremonies. One particularly fascinating tomb belonged to a scribe, and it contained the largest statues ever found in that area. This massive burial site includes over a dozen pyramids and tombs.
One of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Queen Hatsheps. She ruled Egypt for nearly 20 years, built stunning monuments, and opened up new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter discovered her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. Interestingly, Carter had found two other coffins in a different tomb. One belonged to Hatshepsut's nurse, and the other to an unidentified woman. In 2006, a team of experts decided to investigate whether that mystery woman might actually be the queen herself. They found a tooth in a wooden box labeled with Hatshepsut's name. When they compared it to a gap in the mummy's jaw, it was a perfect match.
Ramses II was another legendary pharaoh, and while he had an incredible reign, it's his mummy that truly made history. You don't hear much about his father, but let's focus on Ramses. He's considered Egypt's most powerful ruler, reigning for a full 60 years and living to the age of 90, which is pretty mind-blowing for that time. It's believed he had over 100 children. Talk about a big family. When he died, he was buried in the Valley of the Kings. But tomb robbers tried to steal everything, so officials moved his body to a secret location to protect it. In the 19th century, Ramses II's mummy was discovered along with those of other rulers and high officials. Unfortunately, it wasn't in great shape, so what did archaeologists do? They flew his mummy to Paris for some much-needed restoration, but there was a catch. You can't just fly a mummy across borders without paperwork. The only solution? They gave Ramses II his own passport, listing his occupation as king, complete with a photo.
Most mummies aren't known for having well-preserved moist skin, but one mummy known as Lady Dai proved otherwise.
And no, not that Lady Dai. This wealthy woman from ancient China was discovered in a beautifully decorated tomb in 1971. For a mummy, she looked amazing.
Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like high humidity and low oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was still styled, and her limbs were still flexible.
The museum where she's displayed also showcases the luxurious items she was buried with, like elegant dresses and musical instruments. Further examination revealed that she died of a heart attack at the age of 50. Even though she lived over 2,000 years ago, Lady Dai is still making headlines.
Then there's Otzi the Iceman, whose mummy was found in the Alps in 1991. At first, Austrian authorities thought he was a modern mountaineer because he was so well preserved.
But it turned out he was actually from the Copper Age. He was discovered in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. Studying his body has taught us a lot about life in prehistoric Europe.
For example, we know he lived in Central Europe and liked eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, clogged arteries, and stomach issues.
But it seems he used acupuncture and herbal medicine to treat his problems. He was skilled with tools too. He had sharpened them just days before his sudden death. Whether he was expecting trouble or just preparing for a routine task, we may never know.
Finally, there's King Tut, probably the one who made mummies world famous. This young pharaoh died at just 19, more than 3,000 years ago, but his mummy remains one of the most iconic in the world.
When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still intact. Unlike many royal tombs, his included luxurious coffins, some made of solid gold.
King Tut's burial site not only offered a rare glimpse into ancient Egyptian history, but his DNA also helped scientists learn more about his family and the era he lived in.
Turns out the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that probably made walking a bit difficult.
Now let's talk about Ginger, probably one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like a 5,000-year-old time traveler who still looks kind of awesome with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails.
Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the oldest naturally preserved body ever found. Before people figured out how to mummify intentionally, they used to bury bodies in shallow graves in Egypt's hot, dry desert sand. The heat and dryness sucked the moisture out of the body, stopping bacteria from growing, so the body got preserved naturally.
Scientists still aren't sure if Ginger's preservation was intentional. But since he was buried with some pottery, it's likely that whoever buried him had some idea about how preservation worked. If you want to meet Ginger in person, you can. He's currently chilling at the British Museum. Now get this, a Dutch art collector once bought a statue from Asia and ended up with a bizarre surprise. Hidden inside the statue was a mummy.
Sadly, the body was way too fragile to remove, so they had to leave it in there. What's even more amazing is that the mummy is over 1,000 years old, and it had actually been on display for 200 years before it was placed in the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writing.
Experts believe the person may have undergone something called self-mummification, an intense process that includes a special diet and tea to make the body less prone to decay. Only a handful of people could survive this grueling ritual, and those who did were deeply respected. No Egyptian queen has puzzled historians and scientists quite like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she's known for her long neck, big eyes and high cheekbones. Her name literally means the beautiful woman has come.
Even though she wasn't a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti made a lasting impact. Historical records show she played a major role as both queen and wife, and her influence was huge. She earned a lot of admiration, but also made plenty of enemies during her lifetime. She was connected to King Tut, but not by blood. She was actually his stepmother. As of now, no one knows for sure who her mother was, but that might be changing soon.
A local Egyptologist digging in the Valley of the Kings recently uncovered 2 mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. Experts think we may finally be close to getting a solid answer. If one of those mummies turns out to be Nefertiti, we're in for something big. A CT scan and DNA analysis could give us the most complete and accurate picture of this iconic queen we've ever had.
It's crazy to think we've barely scratched the surface of what's buried beneath modern Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and prosperity, but she sadly died during a period of social unrest, and with that, her tomb's location was lost.
So, where's my mom? Well, in November 1922, a young boy was walking through Egypt's desert hills and stumbled upon some ancient stone steps. That discovery turned out to be one of the greatest archaeological finds in history, the untouched tomb of Tutankhamun. Archaeologists uncovered around 5,000 artifacts, including jewelry, fabrics, painted ornaments, and funerary masks. You've probably seen one of them before. They've become some of the most iconic symbols of ancient Egypt. It's been over 100 years since that discovery.
And now, humanity may finally be on the verge of another groundbreaking find, Cleopatra's tomb. Cleopatra was the last active ruler of Egypt's Ptolemaic kingdom. She ruled from 51 to 30 BCE. There are tons of ancient records about her reign and her one-of-a-kind personality. But to this day, no one's been able to figure out where she was buried or how exactly she died.
That's where archaeologist Dr. Kathleen Martinez comes in. She spent decades studying ancient records and temples around Alexandria and believes Cleopatra's tomb lies beneath the ruins of the ancient city Taposiris Magna, founded in 280 BCE. This was a major coastal city in northern Egypt where tens of thousands of people worked in trade and industry. And guess what? Dr. Martinez may have been right. she and her team discovered a hidden underground tunnel near Alexandria, about 0.8 miles long, cut deep into the rock beneath the Taposiris Magna temple.
During further excavations, they found a bunch of clues pointing to Cleopatra's burial site being deep within that tunnel. It's even possible she was buried there alongside the Roman general Mark Antony. According to ancient records, Cleopatra and Antony were deeply in love and stood united against the Roman Empire. The Roman Senate had declared Mark Antony a traitor.
Natural disasters in the Taposiris Magna area over thousands of years might complicate excavation efforts. Earthquakes and floods damaged the city and probably flooded its underground tunnels. But archaeologists are hopeful that the ancient tomb is still intact and may contain valuable treasures and records from Egypt's royal life during the final dynasties. There's a chance the dig site could get flooded with mud, which means the work will take a lot of time and funding. Still, the archaeologists are convinced it'll be worth it.
Even though it's still too early to say for sure that Cleopatra is buried there, researchers have found plenty of clues in the tunnel. Like pottery, dozens of coins with Cleopatra's and Alexander the Great's faces on them, and even a bust of the Egyptian queen. Cleopatra remains one of Egypt's most famous figures, right up there with Ramses III and Tutankhamun. She's inspired countless movies, paintings, and books.
But what made her so famous? Cleopatra was known for being a complex character. She was a brilliant and beautiful ruler who pulled Egypt out of a crisis and turned it into a thriving power. Some medieval Arabic texts even claim she was skilled in chemistry, math, and philosophy, and may have written several scientific books. She was fluent in many languages and had excellent diplomatic skills. At the same time, many legends paint her as a dangerous seductress who drove men crazy. But there's no real evidence that her beauty was unmatched.
Hollywood added to the myth by casting glamorous actresses to play her in big films, turning her into more of a fashion icon than a historical queen. And the Roman Emperor Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son, helped shape that image too, portraying her as a manipulative seductress because she was his political enemy.
Although she was born in Egypt, Cleopatra wasn't ethnically Egyptian. Her ancestors were Greek, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. Still, the Egyptian people loved her. She learned their language and deeply respected their traditions. She understood their history, mindset, and customs, and she used that knowledge to boost the economy and strengthen Egypt's global standing. Much of her success came from her cleverness and charm. She loved theatrical displays and extravagant celebrations. She knew how to put on a show. But behind the luxury and spectacle was a smart, calculating ruler. Ancient Egypt was a rich, luxurious nation, and Cleopatra did everything she could to increase its wealth and international influence.
For example, when she was fighting for power with her brother Ptolemy XIII, she knew she couldn't defeat him on her own, so she aimed to win Julius Caesar over. Caesar arrived in Alexandria and Cleopatra wanted to meet him, but her brother knew and tried to stop her. Instead of making a grand entrance, Cleopatra came up with a clever plan. She had herself wrapped in a rug, or a linen sack according to some versions, and smuggled into Caesar's private chambers. When she emerged from the bundle, Caesar was impressed by her boldness and beauty. They quickly became lovers and allies.
Later, she used her charm again for political reasons, this time with Mark Antony. She sailed to meet him on a golden ship with purple sails and silver decorations. Dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, she sat under a luxurious canopy while her servants, dressed as cupids, fanned her and burned incense. She staged this dramatic entrance on purpose. She knew Antony admired Greek mythology and saw himself as the embodiment of Dionysus. Her performance worked. He was so taken by her that they married. Cleopatra protected her throne, solidified her alliance with Rome, and had 3 children with Antony. In Egypt, they lived in luxury and hosted massive celebrations, but their relationship caused a scandal in Rome.
Octavian, Antony's main rival for power, took full advantage. He launched a smear campaign, portraying Cleopatra as a manipulative foreign queen who had Antony under her spell. The Roman Senate sided with Octavian and declared Cleopatra an enemy of the state. In 33 BCE, things came to a head when Antony's navy clashed with Octavian's fleet. Octavian won, and Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt. According to some sources, they took refuge near Alexandria. As Roman forces closed in, they hid in one of Cleopatra's palaces, where they both eventually died.
Some legends say Cleopatra was a master of poisons. It's said she provoked a venomous snake. According to one legend, Cleopatra let an Egyptian cobra bite her. Another story says she pricked herself with a poisoned needle. There's even a theory that she always carried a vial of poison hidden in her hairbrush. When she was cornered, she supposedly dipped the needle in the poison and pricked herself. But the truth is, no one knows for sure. Scientists are still trying to figure out what really happened. Maybe once Cleopatra's tomb is found, the world will finally get some answers about her tragic end.
She was the last ruler of ancient Egypt. After her death, Octavian looted her palaces and temples, then returned to Rome, where he became the first emperor. He ruled successfully and expanded Rome's territory. His reign ended when he died at the age of 75. History might have turned out very differently if Cleopatra and Mark Antony had won that naval battle.
By the way, did you know that more time passed between Cleopatra's reign and Neil Armstrong's moon landing than between Cleopatra's time and the building of the Great Pyramid of Giza? Armstrong stepped onto the moon in 1969, 2,038 years after Cleopatra was born, and the Great Pyramid was built in 2560 BCE. Just imagine how long Egypt's history really is. Cleopatra is actually closer in time to us than she was to the pyramids.
When you hear the word mummy, it might give you chills. That's because most of us associate mummies with creepy characters from horror movies. But in reality, mummies have helped us understand a lot about ancient civilizations, their rulers, and how they dealt with the loss of loved ones.
The ancient Egyptians are probably the most famous people in the world for their mummies. They believed in some kind of afterlife as long as certain conditions were met. That's why they insisted on preserving the body through mummification and placing it in a well-furnished tomb. It was like giving the dead their own fully equipped apartment.
Why did they believe this? Well, mainly because they were closely connected to the natural world. They saw daily cycles all around them, like the rising and setting of the sun, or how plants regrow even after withering away. They also believed in the powerful god Osiris, who symbolized death and resurrection. To prepare for the afterlife, ancient Egyptians followed specific rituals like mummification. This process involved using things like honey, resin, and incense to preserve the body.
There's no mummy more famous than King Tut's. He was a young pharaoh who ruled Egypt over 3,000 years ago.
The problem with discovering royal tombs is that most had already been looted. People knew the pharaohs were buried with tons of treasure, so grave robbers often got there first. That's why everyone was so excited when King Tutankhamun's tomb was opened in 1922. It hadn't been robbed like the others. It had been hidden really well.
Inside, his mummy was placed inside 3 coffins, one of which was made of solid gold. The items inside the tomb gave us a vivid picture of life in ancient Egypt. Studying his mummy also taught us a lot about the culture and practices of his time. We even learned more about his family by analyzing his DNA.
Scientists discovered that he had malaria and a foot problem that probably made it hard for him to walk. Another important pharaoh was Ramses II, who ruled Egypt for 68 years, an incredibly long reign for that era. He was known for his military campaigns and massive building projects. Many things from his time still survive, including a giant statue of him.
Ramses II was about 6 feet tall and lived to be around 90. After examining his body, scientists believe he may have had a spinal condition. Remember those grave robbers we mentioned? They might be the reason Ramses II ended up in a plain coffin, hidden with a group of other royal mummies in a secret cache at Deir el-Bahari.
That collection was rediscovered in 1881. Thankfully, archaeologists were able to identify him because records of his reburials were written on his wrappings. The mummification process itself was no small task. In ancient Egypt, it took an incredible 70 days to complete.
A special person would say specific prayers while carefully preparing and drying the body using a type of salt called natron. They used linen and resin to make the body look lifelike, then wrapped it tightly in cloth. The tomb was just as important as the body.
For example, the walls of King Tut's tomb were decorated with detailed artwork showing his journey to the afterlife, from the funeral procession to his final resting place.
His journey through the underworld. The ancient Egyptians believed that every person went through this journey after death, so they filled their tombs with items and paintings to help them on this spiritual trip.
In addition, the tomb walls were decorated with spells from a special book, a collection of poems that the Egyptians believed helped guide people to the afterlife.
To show how important this journey was, people even placed food inside these ancient tombs. In King Tut's tomb, archaeologists found 36 jars of old wine and baskets of fruit that were believed to have been left to help him on his way to the afterlife.
Egyptians thought the trip to the next world took a long time, so they left plenty of supplies, like food and water, for their loved ones.
Pharaohs often included lots of fancy clothes and beautiful jewelry to make sure they traveled in style. These items included different types of linen clothing, like robes, scarves, gloves, and headpieces, plus a ton of gold jewelry set with gemstones, bracelets, buckles, pendants, necklaces, rings, and even little beetle-shaped charms for protection.
Some tombs also had fans made of ivory and ostrich feathers to keep them cool in the next life.
Some pharaohs even made sure to take boats with them into their forever apartments. For example, Pharaoh Khufu built the Great Pyramid at Giza as his tomb, and a large boat was found buried inside it.
King Tut, on the other hand, was buried with several boat paddles, but not with an actual boat. Instead, he had 3 chariots and lots of walking sticks made from valuable materials.
Maybe that means he preferred to travel across land rather than by sea in the afterlife.
One of the most fascinating things found near ancient mummies was bottles of oils and perfumes. After all, if pharaohs were supposed to look stylish, they might as well smell nice too, right?
Some of them even had old board games in their tombs, often made from precious materials like gold or ivory. One popular game was called Senet. It was a big hit among ancient Egyptians and kind of looked like modern chess.
The Egyptians may have the most famous mummies in the world, but they weren't actually the first to do mummification.
It all started in South America with an ancient culture called the Chinchorro. As far as we know, they were the first people to preserve their dead, about 2,000 years before the Egyptians began their own rituals.
Sure, we've learned a lot about ancient rulers from studying their mummies. But for a long time, we had no idea what they actually looked like when they were alive.
That changed recently, when archaeologists studying ancient Egyptian artifacts discovered some very special mummy portraits. These portraits are incredibly detailed paintings of individuals, made while they were still alive.
Unlike classic paintings on canvas, these were usually done on wood.
They're known for being super realistic and beautiful. In fact, researchers have even used them to help diagnose diseases by comparing them with the actual mummified bodies. Some portraits even show jewelry that was later found on the mummies themselves.
The recent discovery of these portraits in Central Egypt was a huge deal. It was the first time in over 100 years that anything like this had been found. Interestingly, mummies have also appeared naturally around the world.
Mummification can happen without human involvement thanks to environmental factors like extreme cold or heat, low oxygen areas, or accidental exposure to natural chemicals that preserve the body. These conditions stop bacteria from growing, which helps keep the body intact.
One of the most famous natural mummies is Otzi the Iceman.
We now know he was a man who lived in Europe about 5,000 years ago. But when his body was discovered in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities originally thought he was just a modern hiker because his body was so well preserved. After pulling him out of the glacier, they realized he actually came from the Copper Age.
And a few years ago there was a